So thank you for coming. And I wanted to start basically by thanking a whole bunch of people. First of all, the LRC committee for granting, the funds that are needed. This is the project that I'm doing is a 3-year long project. So basically, I'm going back every year and sort of asking for more funding and more support. And they renewed the second phase. We're done with the first phase, finished it last academic year, and this year we're going ahead with the second phase of the project. So thank you to the committee, thanks to Ian, who's been very supportive and very helpful. Piero also from the LRC, who helped us with a lot of logistics. My colleague, Wajdan Absi, who's here, who actually worked on all the PowerPoints, parts. So it was really tremendous to have her because, of course, I have someone else who knows, the grammar and the language really well and could, tell me things, other than the precise work that she did. And also the fun part of filming, together, because at first we didn't think we needed her, because I thought I could actually flip the PowerPoints as I'm talking, but then we couldn't do that. And so she sat there outside of the screen and she could read what I'm saying, like, and follow and go tick, and then we're, and it worked so smoothly. And then the two guys who filmed us, I want to thank them, even though they're not here. Sharif Sadiq, who's a great friend and who's also a great director, who has a lot of credits in, making movies before. And also his assistant, Ali, who came. And it made it more fun because the two of them actually, after we filmed, turned to me and started asking questions. But they told us in school, and then we started discussing the grammar points, actually, that I was teaching. So it turned into an audience, not only, but you said, that was actually really fun to explain that to them. They're both Egyptian, they both speak, the language. And so that made it fun and very interesting. So I'm looking forward to the next stage. Before I talk about the practical aspects and how we did this, and I'm going to show you maybe one or two of the lectures as an example, I wanted to contextualize this a little bit, because I think it's more than, to me at least, more than what it appears. It's more than just a collection of videos. And it's about the feeling that I have about the place of grammar in language teaching, specifically the place of precision in language teaching. And I'm noticing that a lot of our students know a lot of words, but they don't really put them together the way they should put them together. They might know very complex words, but then I always use two analogies here. The first is like, you have the bricks, but you don't know how to build a house. You have all of these words, all these terms, all this stuff, and it's very rich, but it's all pile. You don't know, you don't have a plan, and you don't have also the skill to know how to put these bricks together so that you build this thing that we call Arabic or whatever it is. And I use the other analogy, which is, I think, more biological, of trying to talk about grammar as the genetic material, that we have. That the vocabulary is more like the proteins. If the genes don't tell these proteins what to be, you cell are going to be a heart, or you're going to be a stomach, and you're going to be that at a specific time in the growth, and also you have a history. You come from generations. This is the cultural aspect that's very important to me in these lectures. That there is genealogy in the way we teach Arabic. There's a culture of teaching Arabic. Arabic talks about itself and sees itself in certain ways. So there's a whole grammar, out there and work that's been spanning centuries. How does that get integrated into our class, etc.? In Arabic, it's a bit specific, and I'll talk more about this. Why is this important? To bring in this cultural dimension in that. But basically, I tell my students, okay, so the genes have to be there, so in order for everything to become an organism that has a history and that functions as an organism, you need to know the grammar. You need to know how to put those proteins in a sequence and in a way that produces, something organic and something meaningful that can function. So there's this, my feeling generally is that most of the new methods and textbooks are kind of leaning more toward the fluency part. You know, the task-based approach, you know, the having the students to do activities, the focus on the recent, the current, the modern, you know, and the students' needs, which I take into consideration, but I think that they should have, you know, more base in precision, which I think is extremely important. So this is more or less what it is. Now, as far as Arabic goes, the situation is very complex. It's complex because, and this might have happened, you know, in other languages, is that most of the textbooks that we have now and we're using have reacted, you know, to old methods and old textbooks. Old textbooks, grammar, translation method, you know that, the grammar is a big part, you read, you do all of this stuff. Then we had a sort of a transitional set of textbooks that emphasized grammar, but kind of tried to work out a way of explaining it that turned out to be so strange. It's totally outside of the way you would describe Arabic grammar in Arabic. So the latest reaction is, you know, what I call, you know, throwing the baby in the water, you know, oh, too much grammar. And then the result is really tricky. Why? Because there's a difference, in my opinion, in between simplifying, right, and in between clarifying. And so instead now what we have in some of our textbooks is a simplified version of the grammar. A simplified version of the grammar as opposed to a clarified version of the grammar, and also a sort of a piecemeal approach. Like the students never see the house. Like, you know, they're putting little bricks here and there, but never have an idea of what. They also don't know what the function is. They don't know that this is going to be a kitchen and we're going to cook here, you know. Its function is to produce food and sustain us. And I'm not talking about aesthetics, right? I'm not talking about style. I'm not talking about how grammar really affects great writing, you know, and how it's incredible tools that you can't do a comparison in Arabic without certain grammatical tools. You can't do it in English either. That in fact it's very functional in that sense. So this is something a bit specific to Arabic. The other specific thing is that it's complex. The grammar is really complex. A hallmark of any language that's kept its form, its ancient form, right, almost intact. You know, the grammar is the same. What we teach today is the same thing that has applied to Arabic, you know, for thousands of years and got canonized, you know, many centuries ago. So how do we bring in this complexity without overwhelming the students, but at the same time without, you know, underestimating them and underestimating their ability, and also doing justice to the language and not being inaccurate? Because in simplifying, we're making lots of mistakes. The textbooks are making lots of mistakes. They're telling them rules that they will discover later when they read that, oh, that was just a transitional thing. There's no transitional thing in grammar. If the transition that we see in kids is very different, you know how complex it is. Like the way my daughter is making certain mistakes in Arabic, but she's working them out. There's a process, and it's built in her, and she can actually do it. We, however, have to build it in, and we have students who are coming to us with a lot of analytical abilities, synthetic abilities. So how do you teach them grammar? And you know this is a complex subject, you know. Inductive, deductive, we just fill them with language and then they'll deduce the rules, and then, you know, from that we kind of formulate, do we give them the forms first and then we practice? It's really a huge issue. And in Arabic, there are certain things you cannot deduct. They're just certain things that we teach simply for form. There's no other way to do it. There are, you know, 12 forms of the verb that's based on a root of 3 letters. If you don't teach those forms to the student explicitly, it'll take them a lifetime, you know, for them to get them. And so sometimes we have the dilemma of what's the function of this? We're teaching them these forms, but what exactly do they do with these forms? And we have that dilemma and we don't have a solution for it. Certain grammar points are so easy to put into a function. You know, when we get into tenses with them, obviously it works, right? But certain things don't work that way. So basically, you know, some of these are, you know, the general, you know, things. And then the last theoretical implication I wanted to talk about is like, I've been teaching this course and we call it Advanced Arabic Grammar Review, for our students. Simply because the textbook is not doing its job, and we are trying to fill in the blanks, but we're not able. And so we're having students actually who, after their third year, are not proficient and not precise enough in their grammar. So here I come and do a remedy thing of like, okay, let's sit together and fix all of these things, right? And work together to just map. And in doing this course and then starting this project, I started mapping Arabic grammar. I don't think Arabic grammar has been mapped before, to my knowledge. There have been books, that talked about certain aspects of it, but I'm talking about really doing a tree. So I started doing a tree of grammar. Like basically just creating these nodes and mapping the whole thing. And it turned out to be a lot of fun, sort of looking at the way, if you looked at the noun, how many types of noun and how does it relate to other categories of, etc. And so I started doing this, and then I've had over the years a huge theoretical issues, even with the old schools. So I'm actually contributing, I think, in my modest way, a new way of looking at, for example, case endings in Arabic. That, there's one thing they consider to be a case ending, which I think is not. It just applies to verbs. And so, in a way, I feel like the project sort of brought me into the debate, right? Into maybe coming up with something and contributing something that is not really just for the classroom, but has theoretical implications about how do we map this grammar and what categories are there and how do we look at them. So it's a great opportunity for me too, so it's fun in a way. It's kind of pulling my brain as a linguist and trying to get me into it. So the practical implications is this, what do we do with grammar inside and outside the class? A lot of our students, read the grammar point, but then reading it, they find it very complex, and then maybe we need more charts and more colors and more things and more visual things that will help the students really see, right, how this thing works. And I thought that it works in class when we explain things to them, and so perhaps I could find a way in which I could give them half of that at least, a lecture that they can hear with very clear PowerPoints that they can freeze and stop at any point. At a certain point, we want them to be downloadable too, so that they can actually have them with them. And maybe because we're interacting, it'll be a lot better than actually reading the book, because the book is not helping. To have 2 pages on a grammar point and then they kind of, so I'm sure you share that feeling with me. So that's one of the things. The available resources are not really that many in Arabic. The whole bunch of them really come from, the Orientalist school, that started in Germany and other places, of really almost submitting Arabic grammar to Latin and Greek. And so students are asking me what the jussive is in Arabic. Well, what is the jussive in Arabic? That's a category totally outside of Arabic. There's a way in which the grammar works, and it has its own terminology. And so so you have to unpack that and undo it and sort of reintroduce this idea of like, oh, no, Arabic has a way of looking at itself, as I said. It has had a way of teaching itself, for centuries. And so somehow we have to look at that and reconsider it and kind of be part of that lineage. So that, because it imparts a lot of culture, it imparts a lot of ways. And the available resources that I found were, mostly targeting, the Muslim who's interested in reading the Quran, and so you get these very long, boring lectures of somebody sitting down and then talking about, I don't know what, for an hour and a half, and it's not clear, the sound is not clear, it's not reinforced by things. I found certain other examples and a great attempt by some of the teachers here in the US. A little bit of issues, the standards, there need to be good standards. Teachers sometimes are telling students different things about grammar, and so, there are mistakes, lack of precisions, or the way they approach it is like somebody's writing on the board, and then he turns to you or she turns to you and starts explaining the point itself. I didn't find it to be clear, efficient, or consistent, and also academically accurate. Like there's a challenging grammar out there, in Arabic that needs, we need to approach it with a bit of respect and also a bit of scholarship. The standardizing the grammar is a great thing. I thought that one of the objectives of this would be, okay, here's the lecture, you could disagree with me, we can fix certain things, but here's a standard that all of us, can use. So here are what the sources say, this is how the grammar is mapped, let's look at it, let's all tell the students more or less, the same thing. Sure, we can get into debates, there are still, certain questions that need to be debated, but that would help us also. And Arabic for English speakers, there were not resources that are targeting the student, of Arabic who's not a native speaker. A lot of these websites are addressing the school children too, so it makes it age inappropriate, and it's also targeting them specifically. Some of them are tremendous. There's one that came out of Amor that targets, children in refugee camps, especially Palestinian children, because schools are closed most of the time, etc. And it's beautifully made, it's fantastic, except that it's all in Arabic, right? And it's also targeting an age population, a certain age population, and so it was not really appropriate for what we do. So here are basically the general ideas of what we were trying to do. We were trying to actually come up with a grammar that shows things clearly, doesn't oversimplify, that connects to the tradition, the linguistic tradition, also the tradition of teaching Arabic, through Arabic, using some English, and progressively maybe phasing out of it, to make it available to a student at the university who wants to study the language. And, having the fun of raising some theoretical questions also about grammar, how it's seen, what categories are, etc. And I wanted to show you maybe, one lecture or two, and then, it's just so that you see, so do I have to search again, or, I have to search it, it's,
top left.
right. Here we go. So, maybe I'll choose one. The idea was really to have very, very short, very concise, very brief. And the idea is not to have exercises, or to have, that's something that could be complemented somewhere else. This is not what these lectures are trying to do. They're trying to explain the point in the clearest way possible, and hoping that teachers, textbook, etc., can provide the practice. So maybe I'll do.
طلاب العربية طالبات العربية أهلا وسهلا بكم في درس جديد من دروس المنحة. الدرس 24، الجملة الاسمية مبتدأ وخبر. الجملة the sentence in Arabic فعلية verbal تبدأ بفعل that starts with a verb، واسمية تبدأ باسم. It's a nominal sentence that starts with a noun. Now, الجملة الاسمية is of two types. الأصلية, the original, والمنسوخة, literally copied from the original. And those, المنسوخة is of two types, introduced by كان وأخواتها, كان and its sisters, وإن وأخواتها, إن and its sisters. These two will be covered later in the process. المبتدأ والخبر. Now let's take a look at the main type of nominal sentence that includes a subject and a predicate. انظروا إلى هذه الأمثلة. Look at these examples. هي طالبة. هذا درس طويل. القاهرة مدينة تقع على ضفاف النيل. الطلاب لا يحبون الدراسة في عطلة الأسبوع. So notice the diversity of al-khabar and how it can be also a verbal sentence. Nonetheless, this is still جملة اسمية فيها مبتدأ الطلاب وفيها خبر, and الخبر is a verbal sentence that on which the rules of the verbal sentence will actually apply. يمكن تقديم الخبر في العربية. You can actually front the predicate. The predicate can come before the subject in Arabic, but you have to have two conditions to do that. شرطان. الشرط الأول هو الخبر يكون شبه جملة. So your predicate has to be a prepositional phrase. Remember شبه الجملة when we talked about الجملة وشبه الجملة ومجموعة الألفاظ. And the second condition is المبتدأ نكرة. So your subject is indefinite. Look at these examples. في بيتنا غرف عديدة. Literally you say, in our house are several rooms. فوق الطاولة كتاب. Upon the table or on the table is a book. لي ثلاث أخوات. I have three sisters. So li literally means to me, and it doesn't really say have as have is used in English. ملاحظة يمكن تقديم الخبر ولو كان المبتدأ معرفا للتوكيد. Sometimes you can actually have the predicate fronted and come in the front even if the subject is definite for emphasis. And for that we chose a saying in Arabic that goes في التأني السلامة وفي العجلة الندامة. There's peace and safety in deliberateness and slowness, and regrets in hastiness. شكرا جزيلا يا طلابي وأراكم بإذن الله في الدرس القادم.
So that was the idea. Basically, looking at the,
I have a question. Who's
Sure.
the public of these videos? Is it your students at Columbia, or it could be anyone in the world?
We put it, actually, that was one of the things I discussed with Columbia from the beginning. I'm not interested in building something and putting it in a small website here that's used only. So the condition was that we make this public.
Okay.
And so it's actually on the comments on YouTube, anybody. The only thing is they have to give credit, but they can use it. And people started using it actually in other universities. So, and it's open for anybody in the world, not only for, and I think it makes it. Now we're thinking of actually building a website that's part of a new curriculum that we're developing. That's going to be all online. And these grammar parts are going to be in it, one of the components. We built the listening component, we built the grammar, we're building the reading, etc. So hopefully we will have a curriculum, that's ready. My dream is that I have the tree that I did, that I have actually a website on which you could click on nodes and they open up and they lead you to different places. So that it shows the process too, like you find the noun in Arabic as a category and you click on the noun and then things come out of the noun and then you can follow it, in different directions. That would be ideal. But, that's a dream. I think technologically, some people are telling me it's possible, but, it needs the resources and the know-how and somebody who would know how to do that. If it happens, it would be wonderful. I'd be so, so happy to see those maps that I did, but they're so big, you can't just have them as, one static thing. And this was one of our challenges, basically, in the frames that you see. We had to sequence them. I could do this whole lesson actually in one shot, and it would be wonderful because then you see, here's the types of sentences, and you see, how the tree works, right? But we couldn't do that because it would be too small, etc. And so, but the sequence that Wajdan did was wonderful.